The wind howled across the amber plains of Elderglow, a fledgling town nestled in the heart of a fictional 19th century American frontier, its name inspired by the golden light that bathed the valley at dusk. Clara Beaumont clutched a crumpled letter to her chest, her boots sinking into the dusty earth as she stepped off the stagecoach. She was 28 with auburn hair that caught the sun like fire and eyes that held stories no one had bothered to read. She'd come to Elderglow seeking a new life, a husband promised, through letters exchanged over months, a man named Thomas Harrow. But the man waiting at the station wasn't Thomas. It was a wiry clerk, his face pinched with discomfort, who handed her a note. Miss Beaumont, I regret to inform you I cannot proceed with our arrangement. You are not as described. Taich. Her heart sank like a stone in the river, winding through the valley. Not as described. She'd been honest, perhaps too honest, about her plain features, her sturdy frame built from years of farm work, her lack of wealth or status. She'd written of her dreams, her love for books, her hope to build a home. Yet here she was, rejected before even a handshake. The clerk shuffled away, leaving Clara alone with the scent of sagebrush and the sting of betrayal. Clara squared her shoulders, refusing to let tears fall. She'd left her old life in Virginia, behind a place where whispers about her unladylike strength and unmarriageable looks had followed her like shadows. Elderglow was her chance to start anew, to prove she was more than what others saw. The town sprawled before her wooden storefronts, a church with a crooked steeple and distant mountains that seemed to whisper, "Stay, you're enough." She found a boarding house run by Doña Rufina, a warm-eyed widow with a laugh like a summer breeze. "You're not the first to come here with a broken heart, Nina," Rufina said, pouring Clara a cup of coffee that smelled of roasted beans and comfort. "But hearts mend, and Elderglow has a way of surprising you." Rufina's words were a balm, but Clara couldn't shake the ache of Thomas's rejection. Had she been foolish to hope for love? That evening, as Clara unpacked her few belongings, a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, a quilt her mother made, she heard laughter from the town square. Curious, she wandered out, drawn by the glow of lanterns and the strum of a banjo. There she saw him, a man with broad shoulders and kind eyes, his hands calloused from work, directing children in a game of tag. His name, she'd learned later, was Elias Kane, a farmer and unofficial leader in Elderglow. He caught her gaze and smiled, not with pity, but with a quiet curiosity that made her heart stutter. Clara didn't know it yet, but that moment marked the beginning of something new. Could she find a place here despite the sting of rejection? Could she trust again in a town that didn't yet know her name? The sunrise over Elderglow painted the sky in hues of peach and gold, as if the heavens themselves were apologizing for Clara's rough welcome. She stood on the boarding house porch, her breath visible in the crisp morning air, watching the town stir to life. The scent of fresh-baked bread from the bakery mingled with the earthy tang of dew-soaked grass. Clara's hands tightened around her shawl. She could board the next stagecoach back to Virginia, back to whispers and judgment, or she could stay and carve out a place in this wild, hopeful land. The choice felt like a weight on her chest, heavier than the trunk she'd hauled across the country. Doña Rufina found her there, pressing a warm biscuit into her hands. "You look like you're deciding the fate of the world, Nina," she said, her dark eyes twinkling. "Elderglow's not perfect, but it's got good bones. Stay a while. You might find it fits you." Clara bit into the biscuit, its buttery warmth a small comfort. Rufina's kindness was a tether, but the sting of Thomas Harrow's rejection still burned. Not as described. The words echoed, gnawing at her confidence. Had she been naive to think a man could love her for her heart, not her face? Determined to distract herself, Clara ventured into town. The main street buzzed with activity, merchants unloading barrels, children chasing a stray dog, and a blacksmith's hammer ringing like a heartbeat. She passed a general store where a woman with sharp cheekbones and a haughty air eyed her curiously. "You're the mail-order bride Thomas sent away," the woman said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm Abigail Crane, his fiancée now." Clara's stomach twisted. Abigail was everything Clara wasn't: petite, polished, with a smile that could charm a snake. So Thomas had replaced her already with someone who fit the town's idea of beautiful. Swallowing her hurt, Clara nodded politely and moved on, but Abigail's words clung like burrs. She wandered toward the river, its waters glinting under the morning sun, and sat on a smooth rock, letting the rush of the current soothe her. That's where Elias Kane found her. He was carrying a fishing pole, his sleeves rolled up, to reveal forearms tanned by years of work. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low and steady, like the river itself. Clara hesitated, then nodded. "You're new here," Elias said, casting his line. "Heard you had a rough start." His tone wasn't pitying, just matter of fact, and Clara appreciated it. She told him about the letter, the rejection, her uncertainty about staying. Elias listened, his eyes fixed on the water, but she felt his attention like a warm blanket. "Elderglow's a place for second chances," he said finally. "I came here 5 years ago running from my own mistakes. Lost someone I loved, thought I'd never find my way again. But this town, these people, they've got a way of showing you who you are." His words stirred something in Clara, hope perhaps, or the spark of possibility. But could she trust it? Could she face a town that already judged her, with Abigail's smug face as a reminder of her failure? As Elias reeled in a small fish, he grinned at her, and for a moment the weight on her chest lightened. Maybe Elderglow could be more than a place of rejection. Maybe it could be home. The air in Elderglow carried the sharp bite of autumn, and Clara felt it sting her cheeks as she walked the dirt path to the town schoolhouse. Leaves crunched under her boots, their rust and gold a mirror to the fire in her heart, a fire she was determined to kindle. Thomas's rejection and Abigail's sneer had left scars, but Clara refused to let them define her. Today she'd take a step forward, even if it was small. The schoolhouse needed a teacher, Rufina had told her, and Clara, who'd taught her younger siblings to read back in Virginia, felt a spark of purpose at the thought. Could she, an outsider with no claim to this town, dare to offer something of value? The schoolhouse was a modest building, its whitewash peeling like old skin, but the chatter of children inside was bright and alive. Clara hesitated at the door, her hand hovering over the knob. What if they saw her as Thomas did a woman who didn't belong? Before doubt could root too deeply, a voice called out. "You must be Miss Beaumont," said a wiry man with spectacles, the town's preacher and school board head, Mr. Caldwell. His smile was cautious but not unkind. "Rufina says you've got away with words and a steady hand. We're desperate for a teacher since Miss Lila left to marry." Clara squared her shoulders, her mother's quilted bag heavy with books and resolve. "I'd like to try, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Inside, the children, ranging from gap-toothed 6-year-olds to lanky teens, watched her with curious eyes. She introduced herself, reading a passage from Robinson Crusoe to capture their attention. The room grew quiet, save for the crackle of the fireplace and the occasional rustle of a page. For the first time since arriving, Clara felt seen, not for her plain face or sturdy build, but for her mind. After the lesson, as the children scampered out, Clara lingered to tidy the room. That's when Elias appeared, leaning against the doorframe, a sack of apples in his hand. "Heard you took on the school," he said, his hazel eyes catching the afternoon light. "Those kids are lucky. You've got a gift." He offered her an apple, its skin cool and smooth, and their fingers brushed as she took it. The touch sent a warmth through her, unexpected and disarming. "Not everyone would step up like that," he added. "Takes courage." Clara bit into the apple, its tart sweetness grounding her. "I'm not sure it's courage," she admitted. "Maybe it's just stubbornness." Elias laughed, a sound like the low rumble of the river, and for a moment the world felt lighter. But then Abigail Crane swept into the schoolhouse, her silk dress rustling like a warning. "Elias, you're needed at the mill," she said, her gaze flicking to Clara with thinly veiled disdain. "And Miss Beaumont, don't get too comfortable. Some of us think the school deserves better than a stranger." The words cut, but Clara held Abigail's stare. "I'm here to teach, Miss Crane. That's all that matters." Abigail huffed and left, but her presence lingered like a storm cloud. Elias frowned, his jaw tight. "Don't mind her," he said. "She's used to getting her way. But you, Clara, you're doing something real here." His words were a lifeline, but doubt still gnawed. Could she withstand Abigail's influence and the town's scrutiny? Could she prove she belonged? As Elias walked away, his silhouette framed by the golden fields, Clara felt a resolve take root. She'd stay not just for herself, but for the children, for the chance to build something lasting. But what would it cost her to stand her ground? The moon hung low over Elderglow, casting silver shadows across the valley as Clara sat by her window in the boarding house, her candle flickering like her resolve. The day's triumph at the schoolhouse felt fragile now, overshadowed by the whispers she'd overheard at the general store. "She's too plain for a teacher," one woman had murmured. "And that Thomas Harrow business, poor thing." But what did she expect? The words stung, rekindling old wounds from Virginia, where her broad shoulders and unpolished features had marked her as less than worthy. Clara traced the worn edges of her mother's quilt, its patches a reminder of a woman who taught her to stand tall. Could she do that here when the town's eyes judged her every step? The next morning, Clara arrived at the schoolhouse early, the scent of pine and morning mist clinging to her dress. She'd prepared a lesson on poetry, hoping to spark the children's imaginations. As she wrote lines from Wordsworth on the chalkboard, her hands steadied. Teaching felt like a lifeline, a way to prove her worth beyond appearances. The children trickled in their faces, bright with curiosity, and for an hour Clara lost herself in their laughter and questions. A girl named Lucy with braids and a shy smile lingered after class. "Miss Beaumont, you make words sound like magic," she said, pressing a daisy into Clara's hand. The small gesture warmed her, a seed of belonging taking root. But the warmth faded when Abigail Crane appeared at the schoolhouse door, flanked by two women from the town council. "Miss Beaumont," Abigail said, her voice sharp as a blade, "we're concerned about your qualifications. Elderglow deserves a teacher with refinement, not just enthusiasm." The women nodded, their eyes avoiding Clara's. It was clear Abigail's influence ran deep, her beauty and status, a currency Clara lacked. "I'm teaching the children to love learning," Clara replied, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her chest. "Judge me by their progress, not by your standards." Abigail's smile was cold. "We'll see what the council decides." Deflated, but defiant, Clara sought solace by the river, where the water's rush drowned out the echo of Abigail's words. Elias was there, mending a fishing net, his hands steady and sure. He looked up, sensing her turmoil. "Rough day?" he asked, setting the net aside. Clara hesitated, then poured out the encounter with Abigail, the whispers, the doubt. Elias listened, his silence a safe harbor. "You're not alone in this," he said finally. "Abigail's got sway, but she doesn't speak for everyone. I've seen how those kids light up around you." "That's real, Clara." His words were a balm, but they stirred something deeper, a flicker of connection she wasn't ready to name. Elias shared a story of his own, a fiancée who'd left him years ago for a wealthier man, leaving him to rebuild in Elderglow. "I thought I wasn't enough either," he admitted, his eyes on the river. "But this place taught me worth isn't in what others see, it's in what you do." Clara felt a pull toward him, his honesty a mirror to her own hopes. But could she trust this feeling, or was it just another risk of heartbreak? As Elias walked her back to the boarding house, the stars above Elderglow glittered like promises. Clara felt a fire kindling within her, not just to prove Abigail wrong, but to show herself she could belong. But how would she face the council's judgment? And what did Elias's kindness mean for her heart? The Elderglow sky burned crimson as the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows across the town square, where Clara stood, her heart pounding like a drum. Tomorrow the town council would meet to decide her fate as schoolteacher, and the weight of their judgment pressed against her ribs. She'd overheard more whispers today, Abigail's voice sharp and certain rallying doubts about Clara's suitability. Yet as the scent of wood smoke and hay filled the air, Clara felt a fire of her own kindling. She wasn't just fighting for a job, she was fighting for her place in this world, for the right to be seen as more than a rejected bride. At the boarding house, Doña Rufina was kneading dough, her hands steady as she listened to Clara's fears. "You've got a gift," Niña Rufina said, her voice warm as the kitchen's hearth. "But gifts don't shine without a fight. Show them who you are." Inspired, Clara spent the evening planning a bold move. She'd invite the council to the schoolhouse for a demonstration lesson, letting the children's progress speak for her. She stayed up late, her candle dripping wax onto her notes, crafting a lesson on the American frontier, stories of resilience that echoed her own. The next day the schoolhouse was packed. Children sat cross-legged on the floor, their eyes bright with anticipation, while the council's stern-faced men and women, including Abigail, filled the benches. Clara's hands trembled as she began, but her voice grew steady as she wove tales of pioneers who'd faced impossible odds. She had the children recite poems they'd memorized, solve arithmetic problems on slates, and share essays about their dreams. Lucy, the shy girl with braids, read hers aloud, Miss Beaumont teaches us to believe in ourselves even when others don't. The words hit Clara like a ray of sunlight, and she saw a few council members nod, their expressions softening. Abigail, however, remained unmoved, her arms crossed tightly. "This is all very charming," she said, as the lesson ended, "but we need a teacher with proper credentials, not just enthusiasm." Before Clara could respond, Elias stood from the back of the room, his presence commanding attention. "Miss Beaumont's teaching speaks for itself," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've seen these kids grow in ways we haven't had in years. Give her a chance." His support sent a warmth through Clara, but it also drew Abigail's glare, her eyes narrowing, as if sensing a threat. The council promised a decision by week's end, leaving Clara in limbo. As the crowd dispersed, Elias lingered, helping her stack books. "You were incredible today," he said, his smile soft but steady. "You've got a way of making people believe in something bigger." Clara blushed, the compliment stirring feelings she wasn't ready to name. She noticed a scar on his hand, faint but telling, and wondered about the battles he'd fought, ones he'd hinted at, but never fully shared. "Why do you keep helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias paused, his eyes meeting hers. "Because I see you, Clara. Not what others say, but who you are." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. As they walked out into the twilight, the air thick with the scent of pine and promise, Clara felt a shift. She was no longer just fighting for a job, she was fighting for a life, maybe even a love she hadn't dared imagine. But would the council see her worth? And could she trust the growing pull toward Elias? Or was it too soon to hope? The river outside Elderglow murmured secrets to the dawn, its waters catching the first light like scattered diamonds. Clara stood on its banks, her boots damp from the dew-soaked grass, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. The council's decision loomed expected by noon, and the uncertainty gnawed at her like a winter chill. She'd poured everything into that demonstration lesson, her passion, her resolve, her belief in the children. But would it be enough to sway a town swayed by Abigail's influence? The scent of wet earth and wildflowers grounded her, a reminder of why she'd stayed in Elderglow, to build something real, something hers. Back at the boarding house, Doña Rufina was brewing tea, the aroma of chamomile filling the small kitchen. "You've done all you can, Nina," she said, sliding a steaming mug across the table. "Now it's up to them to see your heart." Clara sipped the tea, its warmth soothing but not enough to quiet her doubts. She thought of Elias's words, "I see you, Clara," and the way his eyes had held hers steady and true. Yet even his support felt fragile against the weight of Abigail's campaign. What if the council sided with her and Clara lost her chance to belong? At the town hall, the council meeting was a blur of stern faces and murmured discussions. Clara stood before them, her hands clasped to hide their trembling. Mr. Caldwell, the preacher, spoke first. "Your lesson was impressive. Miss Beaumont and the children clearly thrive under you. But some concerns remain about your fit for Elderglow." Clara's heart sank as Abigail smirked from the crowd, her presence a silent challenge. Before Clara could respond, a small figure pushed forward, Lucy clutching a bundle of papers. "These are our essays, sir," she said, her voice quivering but firm. "Miss Beaumont taught us to write them. Please read them." The council skimmed the children's words, their expressions shifting from skepticism to surprise. Lucy's essay, praising Clara's ability to make learning a joy, seemed to tip the scales. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "We'll keep you on Miss Beaumont for a trial period. Prove yourself and the job is yours." Relief flooded Clara, but it was tempered by the trial period caveat, Abigail's influence, no doubt. As the crowd dispersed, Abigail brushed past, whispering, "Don't get comfortable. Elderglow doesn't need outsiders like you." Clara's resolve hardened, but the victory felt hollow. She wandered to the town square, where a harvest festival was being set up, tables laden with pies, lanterns strung like stars. Elias found her there, his sleeves rolled up from helping with the preparations. Heard the news, he said, his grin warm as the autumn sun. "You did it, Clara." She shook her head, sharing Abigail's parting shot. Elias's jaw tightened. "She's wrong. You're not an outsider, you're part of this town's heart now." He invited her to join the festival, and as they walked among the stalls, the air filled with laughter and the sweet tang of apple cider, Clara felt a flicker of belonging. Elias shared stories of Elderglow's past, how he'd helped rebuild the mill after a fire, how he'd found purpose in serving the community. His openness stirred something in Clara, a longing to know him beyond these moments. But then Abigail appeared, looping her arm through Elias's with a possessive smile. "Elias, you promised me a dance," she said, her eyes daring Clara to challenge her. Clara stepped back, her heart twisting. Was Elias's kindness just that kindness? Or was there something more, something worth risking her heart for? As the fiddles struck up a lively tune, Clara faced a choice: retreat under Abigail's shadow, or claim her place in Elderglow's light. The harvest festival's lanterns swayed in the Elderglow breeze, their golden glow flickering like Clara's courage as she stood at the edge of the town square. The fiddles wove a lively melody, and couples spun in a whirl of skirts and laughter. But Clara's eyes were fixed on Abigail, her arms still looped through Elias's. The sight twisted something sharp in Clara's chest, not just jealousy, but a fear that she'd always be the outsider, watching others claim what she longed for. The air smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke, grounding her in this moment. She could shrink back, let Abigail's presence dim her light, or she could step forward and claim her place. Tonight she chose the latter. Clara smoothed her plain cotton dress, its simplicity a stark contrast to Abigail's silk, and joined the crowd. She found Lucy and her friends playing near a hay bale, their giggles infectious. "Miss Beaumont, dance with us," Lucy begged, tugging her hand. Clara laughed, letting the children pull her into a clumsy circle dance. Their joy was a spark igniting her resolve. She caught Elias's eye across the square, his smile breaking free as he watched her spin with the children. For a moment, Abigail's grip on him seemed to falter. As the music shifted to a slower tune, Elias extricated himself from Abigail and approached Clara. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice low, his hand extended. Clara hesitated, aware of Abigail's glare and the curious glances from townsfolk. But Elias's eyes held no judgment, only a quiet invitation. She took his hand, her heart racing as they joined the dance. His touch was steady, his steps sure, and the world narrowed to the warmth of his hand and the rhythm of the music. "You're braver than you know," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Not everyone would face this town head-on like you have." The words stirred a warmth in Clara, but doubt lingered. "I'm not sure it's bravery," she admitted. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just stubborn." Elias chuckled, his laugh a low rumble. "Stubborn's a good start. It's kept you here, hasn't it?" As they moved, he shared more of his past, a fiancé who'd left him for wealth, a brother lost to illness, a life rebuilt in Elderglow's embrace. His vulnerability mirrored her own, and Clara felt a connection deepening, fragile but real. Abigail, however, wasn't done. She cut in, her smile sharp as she claimed Elias for the next dance. "Don't get ideas, Miss Beaumont," she whispered as she passed. "Elias is kind to everyone. It doesn't mean anything." The words stung, but Clara refused to let them take root. Instead, she joined Doña Rufina at a table, helping serve pie to the townsfolk. Rufina leaned close, her eyes twinkling. "That man's heart is his own, Nina, not hers. Keep being you, and he'll see it." As the night wore on, Clara noticed the townsfolk warming to her. A farmer thanked her for teaching his son to read. A mother praised Lucy's confidence. These small moments felt like victories, proof that she was weaving herself into Elderglow's fabric. But when she saw Elias and Abigail talking by the bonfire, her heart wavered. Was Abigail right? Was Elias's kindness just that kindness? Or was there a chance for something more? As the festival wound down, Clara made a silent vow she'd fight for her place here, not just for the school or the town, but for her own heart. The frost-kissed morning in Elderglow shimmered with possibility, the air sharp with the scent of pine and the promise of winter. Clara stood outside the schoolhouse, her breath clouding in the chill, watching the children arrive with scarves and mittens, their laughter a melody against the quiet valley. The council's trial period hung over her like a storm cloud, but the festival had lit a spark in her, a determination to not just belong, but to build something lasting. Abigail's whispers and the town's lingering doubts still stung, but Clara was done hiding. Today she'd propose a project that could change Elderglow's heart and maybe her own. Inside the schoolhouse, Clara gathered the children for a special lesson. "What does our town need?" she asked her chalk, scratching a list on the board. The answers came fast: a library, a better bridge over the river, a community garden. The idea of a library struck Clara. Hardest books had been her refuge in Virginia, and she wanted that for Elderglow's children. She proposed a town library built by the community to the council later that day. "It's not just for the children," she said, her voice steady despite the skeptical glances. "It's for all of us to learn to dream to grow." Mr. Caldwell nodded thoughtfully, but Abigail scoffed. "A lofty idea for someone still on trial," she said, her words dripping with disdain. Undeterred, Clara rallied the children and their parents after school, sketching plans for a small library near the church. The enthusiasm was infectious. Lucy's father offered lumber, another parent promised nails. Elias joined them, his sleeves rolled up, his presence a quiet anchor. "This is bold, Clara," he said, helping her carry a stack of donated books. "You're giving this town something it didn't know it needed." His smile warmed her, but she caught Abigail watching from a distance. Her arms crossed, her eyes calculating. Clara wondered if Abigail's opposition would sabotage the project or her place in Elias's heart. That evening by the river's edge, Clara shared her fears with Elias as they sorted through donated supplies. The water's soft rush and the scent of damp moss soothed her nerves. "I want this library to matter," she said. "But what if it's not enough? What if Abigail's right and I don't belong?" Elias set down a crate, his gaze steady. "You belong more than you know," he said. "I've watched you fight for those kids, for this town. That's not an outsider's heart, that's Elderglow's." His words stirred a flutter in her chest, and when their hands brushed, the spark felt undeniable. But doubt lingered. Abigail's claim on Elias was still a shadow between them. As they worked, Elias shared more of his past, how he'd rebuilt the mill after the fire, not for glory, but because he believed in Elderglow's future. "You're doing the same," he said. "This library, it's your mill." Clara smiled, the comparison kindling her resolve. But when Abigail appeared, her voice cutting through the dusk, the moment shattered. "Elias, the council's meeting about the mill's expansion," she said, ignoring Clara. "They need you, not this." She gestured dismissively at the library plans. Elias hesitated, then nodded, promising Clara he'd return. Left alone, Clara stared at the river, its current a mirror to her swirling thoughts. The library was her chance to prove herself, but Abigail's influence and her history with Elias threatened to unravel it all. Could Clara trust Elias's support, or was her heart leading her toward another rejection? As the stars emerged, she vowed to push forward for the town, for the children, and for the woman she was becoming. The Elderglow Valley glowed under a late autumn sun, its light filtering through bare branches to dapple the ground, where Clara stood hammer in hand, driving nails into the frame of the new library. The air carried the crisp scent of sawdust and fallen leaves, and the rhythmic thud of hammers echoed like a heartbeat. 2 weeks had passed since her proposal, and the community had rallied: farmers, shopkeepers, even children hauling planks with eager hands. Clara's trial period as teacher hung in the balance, but the library was her stand, a testament to her belief that she could belong. Yet Abigail's shadow loomed, her whispers sowing doubt among the council. Could Clara's vision withstand the storm? Each day the library took shape, a modest wooden structure with wide windows to let in the valley's light. Clara worked alongside the townsfolk, her hands blistered, but her spirit unyielding. Lucy and her friends painted signs, their laughter a balm to Clara's nerves. Elias was there too, his strong hands lifting beams, his presence steady as the mountains. "You're building more than a library," he told her one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're building trust." His words warmed her, but the memory of Abigail's possessive grip on him at the festival lingered, a thorn in her heart. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting the library in a golden haze, disaster struck. A shout rang out. A lantern had tipped, igniting a pile of dry wood. Flames licked at the unfinished walls, and panic seized the crowd. Clara's heart lurched, but she sprang into action, organizing a bucket brigade with the children and townsfolk. Elias worked beside her, hauling water from the river, his face grim but determined. Together they doused the flames, saving most of the structure, though charred beams stood as a reminder of how close they'd come to losing it all. As the crowd dispersed, exhausted but relieved, Clara sat on a crate, her hands trembling. Elias joined her, his shoulder brushing hers, the scent of smoke clinging to them both. "You didn't hesitate," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You led us through that." Clara shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "I was terrified," she admitted. "This library, it's all I have to show I'm worth something here." Elias turned to her, his hazel eyes fierce. "You're worth more than any building, Clara." "I see it. The town's starting to see it too." Before she could respond, Abigail appeared, her face a mask of feigned concern. "What a tragedy," she said, her tone too smooth. "Perhaps it's a sign this project is doomed." Clara's blood-boiled rumors had swirled that the lantern's fall wasn't an accident. She stood facing Abigail. "This town deserves a library, and I'll rebuild it with or without your approval." Abigail's smile faltered, but she turned to Elias, her voice syrupy. "Elias, you should focus on the mill, not this folly." Elias stepped closer to Clara, his choice clear. "I'm where I'm needed," he said, his gaze never leaving Clara. The moment felt like a turning point, a crack in Abigail's armor. As she stormed off, Clara felt a surge of courage. Elias's support, the town's effort, the children's faith, they were her strength. But the fire had exposed vulnerabilities, and the council's final decision on her teaching role loomed. Could she rebuild the library and secure her place in Elderglow? And what did Elias's loyalty mean for her heart, now teetering on the edge of love? The Elderglow dawn broke with a quiet radiance, the valley awash in soft pinks and golds, as if the sky itself was celebrating Clara's resolve. The library stood scarred, but standing its charred beams, a testament to the fire it had survived, and to Clara's refusal to surrender. The air carried the clean scent of fresh-cut lumber and hope, as townsfolk gathered to finish what they'd started. Today was more than a rebuilding. It was the council's final vote on Clara's role as teacher, and the weight of it pressed against her heart. She smoothed her dress, her mother's quilt draped over her shoulders like armor, and vowed to face whatever came with the strength she'd forged in Elderglow. The library's interior buzzed with activity. Children painted shelves, their hands sticky with color, while parents hammered nails and shared stories of their own dreams. Clara moved among them, her voice steady as she directed the work, her heart lifted by their faith in her vision. Lucy ran up her braids, bouncing, and pressed a hand-drawn sign into Clara's hands, "Elderglow Library, built by us all." Tears pricked Clara's eyes, but she smiled, tucking the sign into her pocket. This was her legacy, no matter what the council decided. As the council arrived, Clara stood before the half-finished library, its windows catching the morning light. Mr. Caldwell spoke, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Miss Beaumont, you've shown dedication, but some still question your place here." Abigail stood nearby, her smile smug, but Clara noticed fewer nods of agreement than before. She took a deep breath, her words clear. "I came to Elderglow seeking a home. I stayed to build one, not just for me, but for all of us. This library, these children, this town, they're my proof." Lucy's father stepped forward, holding up his son's reading primer. "She's taught my boy to read better than I ever could. That's enough for me." Elias, standing at Clara's side, spoke next. "Clara's given us more than books, she's given us heart. She belongs here." His words, firm and unwavering, sent a ripple through the crowd. Abigail's face tightened, but she said nothing, her influence waning. The council deliberated briefly, then Mr. Caldwell announced, "Miss Beaumont, you're our teacher permanently." Cheers erupted, and Clara's knees nearly buckled with relief. She'd done it. She'd earned her place. As the crowd dispersed to continue the library's work, Elias pulled Clara aside, leading her to the river's edge. The water sparkled its rush, a familiar comfort scented with moss and memory. "I'm proud of you," he said, his hazel eyes soft but intense. "You didn't just build a library, you changed this town." Clara's heart raced as he took her hand, his touch warm and sure. "And you changed me," he added. "I've been scared to love again, but you make me want to try." His confession unraveled the last of her doubts, and when he leaned in, his kiss was gentle, a promise of equality and trust. Months later, the library stood complete, its shelves brimming with books, its doors open to all. Clara and Elias married in a simple ceremony by the river, with Doña Rufina and Lucy beaming in the front row. Abigail left Elderglow, her influence faded, unable to compete with Clara's quiet strength. The town thrived, the library, a hub of learning and connection, a legacy of Clara's courage. As she stood with Elias watching children read under the valley's golden light, Clara knew she'd found not just love, but a life that mattered. If you loved Clara's story of resilience and love triumphing over prejudice, leave a comment with the keyword legacy and share your thoughts. Like, share, and subscribe to explore more stories like this.